Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the Harmony, watching the stars drift by through the large window. He had been traveling between planets for 15 years now, and the view still made him smile. Today was special, though. Today he was heading to Zenith Station to help two alien races stop fighting each other. The Corvan Empire and the Talanari Republic had been shooting at each other for 6 months over a small moon that had valuable crystals. Both sides claimed they owned it first. Both sides were wrong, but neither wanted to admit it. That was where humans like Jake came in. "Captain, we're getting a message from the Corvan fleet," said Lieutenant Amy Chen, his communications officer. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and bright eyes that never missed anything important. "Put it on the main screen," Jake said, straightening his blue uniform jacket. The Corvans appeared on the screen. They looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs, with scales that changed color when they got angry. Right now, their scales were a deep red, which meant they were very upset. "Human vessel, you are entering a war zone," the Corvan commander said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "Turn back now or face the consequences." Jake smiled and held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Commander Vex, good to see you again. I'm here to help, just like always. The Galactic Council sent me to work out this problem between you and the Talanari." Commander Vex's scales shifted to a lighter red, which meant he was calming down a little. "Morrison, I should have known they would send you. Very well, but do not expect miracles. The Talanari are being unreasonable." The screen switched to show the Talanari fleet commander. The Talanari looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and 4 arms. They were known for being very smart and very proud. Commander Seattle had worked with Jake before, and she respected him. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice musical and soft. "Thank you for coming. Perhaps you can make the Corvans see reason. The moon belongs to my people by right of discovery." Jake nodded to both commanders. "I'll be meeting with both of your teams tomorrow at Zenith Station. Let's find a way to make everyone happy, okay?" After the call ended, Jake sat down in his captain's chair and rubbed his temples. Amy walked over to him with a cup of coffee. "Rough day ahead?" she asked. "They always are," Jake replied, taking a sip of the hot coffee. "But that's what we do. We help people get along, even when they don't want to." Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Commander Lisa Hayes was dealing with her own diplomatic crisis. She stood in the main conference room of the space station Unity, surrounded by representatives from 12 different alien species. They were all arguing about trade routes and shipping rights. Lisa was 42 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a neat bun and green eyes that had seen too many conflicts. She wore the white uniform of the Human Diplomatic Corps, with small flags from dozens of different worlds on her chest. Each flag represented a peace treaty she had helped create. "Please, everyone, calm down," Lisa said, her voice carrying across the room. The alien stopped talking and looked at her. Humans had earned respect over the years for being fair and honest. The Zephyrian ambassador, a bird-like creature with golden feathers, spoke first. "Commander Hayes, the Drex Coalition is trying to block our ships from using the Kepler trade route. This is unacceptable." The Drex representative, who looked like a walking tree with eyes, shook his branch-like arms. "The Zephyrians are carrying weapons through our space. This violates our neutral status." Lisa held up her hand for silence. "Ambassador Kriya, Ambassador Thunder, I understand both of your concerns. Let's look at the facts together and find a solution that works for everyone." She walked to the large display screen and pulled up a map of the trade routes. The Kepler route passes through Drex space, but it's been an open trade route for 50 years. "Ambassador Thunder, your people agreed to keep it open when you joined the Galactic Council." The Drex ambassador's leaves rustled, which meant he was thinking. Yes, but that was before the Zephyrians started carrying military supplies. And Ambassador Kriya, Lisa continued, your people have been using this route to move weapons to your colonies. That does violate the Drex Neutral Zone Agreement. The Zephyrian's feathers fluffed up, which meant she was getting defensive. Those are defensive weapons only. We have the right to protect our people. Lisa nodded. You do. But there are other routes you can use for military supplies. The Kepler route can stay open for civilian trade, and you can use the longer Arcturus route for your defensive materials. Everyone gets what they need. The two ambassadors looked at each other, then back at Lisa. After a moment, they both nodded. This is acceptable, Ambassador Thender said. We agree, Ambassador Kriya added. Lisa smiled. Another crisis solved without anyone getting hurt. This was what humans did best. Across the galaxy, Dr. Ben Carter was working on a very different kind of problem. He stood in the medical bay of his research station, looking at test results on a large computer screen. His hair was gray now after 30 years of helping sick aliens, but his hands were still steady. Doctor, the Altarian delegation is here, said his assistant, Nurse Kelly Rogers. She was in her 30s with red hair and freckles, and she had been working with Ben for 5 years. Ben looked up from his work. Send them in. 3 Altarians entered the medical bay. They were small, green-skinned humanoids with large eyes and webbed fingers. Their leader, Medical Chief Glanter, looked very worried. Dr. Carter, thank you for seeing us, Glanter said in his high, squeaky voice. The plague on our homeworld is getting worse. Our people are dying. Ben nodded and pulled up the medical reports on his screen. I've been studying the samples you sent. The good news is that I think I can help. The bad news is that it's going to take time to make enough medicine for everyone. Glanter's large eyes filled with tears. How much time? 3 months, maybe. 4, Ben said gently. But I can start sending you small amounts of the medicine right away. We'll save as many as we can while we work on making more. The Altarian leader grabbed Ben's hand with both of his small green ones. Thank you, Dr. Carter. You humans are truly blessed by the stars. Ben smiled and patted Glanter's shoulder. We just do what we can. That's what neighbors do for each other. High above Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the command deck of the space station Guardian, watching the blue and green planets spin slowly below. She was 55 years old, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She wore the black uniform of the Human Defense Fleet, with stars on her collar showing her high rank. Admiral, we're getting a distress call from the vegan colonies, reported Captain Paul Brooks, her second in command. He was a big man with a beard and a kind face. What's the situation? Kate asked. Solar storm knocked out their power grid. They've got 2 million people without life support. The storm is too strong for their own ships to get through. Kate nodded. How long to get there? 6 hours at maximum speed, Paul replied. Then let's go. Send the rescue fleet ahead of us. Every ship we can spare. Kate turned to look at Earth one more time. And Paul, make sure we bring extra medical supplies. People are going to be hurt. Yes, Admiral. Should we contact the Galactic Council? Kate shook her head. No time. We help first, do paperwork later. That's always been our way. As the Human Defense Fleet jumped into hyperspace, heading toward the vegan colonies, Kate thought about humanity's place in the galaxy. For 300 years, ever since humans first met other intelligent species, they had been the ones others called when they needed help. Humans were the peacemakers, the healers, the ones who showed up when disasters struck. Other species had bigger armies, more advanced weapons, and larger empires. But humans had something else. They had patience. They had the willingness to help anyone who needed it, even former enemies. They had the ability to see the good in other species, even when those species couldn't see it in themselves. The galaxy had grown comfortable with this arrangement. Humans were useful, predictable, and safe. They were the ones you called when you needed a problem solved peacefully. They were the ones who would risk their own lives to save yours, even if you had never done anything to deserve it. What the galaxy didn't understand was that human kindness was a choice, not a weakness. It was something they decided to do every day, not something they had to do because they couldn't do anything else. But choices can change. And when they do, the results can surprise everyone. The first signs of that change were still months away. For now, humans continued to be what the galaxy expected them to be. The gentle giants who kept the peace and helped anyone in need. They had no idea that their patience, like all good things, would not last forever. The trouble started on a peaceful morning when Senator Rick Dawson received an urgent message in his office on Earth. He was reading reports about successful peace talks between the Rigel Mining Guild and the Centauri Workers Union when his communication device beeped with an emergency signal. Rick was 60 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had spent 20 years representing humanity in the Galactic Council, always fighting for fairness and justice. He picked up the device and saw the worried face of Elder Miran, leader of the Eldarin people. "Senator Dawson, we need your help," Elder Miran said. His voice was shaking with fear. The Eldarins were a gentle race that looked like tall, thin humans with pale blue skin and large, peaceful eyes. They had never hurt anyone in their entire history. "What's wrong, Elder Miran?" Rick asked, leaning forward in his chair. "The Corvan Empire has given us 30 days to leave our homeworld. They say they own Kepler Prime now because of some old law about mineral rights. But Senator, this has been our home for 12 generations. Our ancestors are buried in this soil." Rick felt his stomach drop. The Corvans were known for being aggressive, but this was extreme, even for them. "Have you presented your case to the Galactic Council?" "We tried, but they say the Council needs time to study the matter. Meanwhile, Corvan warships are surrounding our planet. What do we do?" Rick stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the peaceful Earth below. "Don't worry, Elder Miran. I'll bring this to the Council today. We'll find a way to protect your people." But when Rick arrived at the Council chambers that afternoon, he quickly realized that politics were more important than justice. The Corvan Representative General Karn was a massive lizard-like creature with black scales and cold yellow eyes. He spoke in a voice that sounded like metal scraping against stone. "The Eldarins are squatters on Corvan territory," General Karn declared. "The expansion protocols clearly state that any world with strategic minerals belongs to the first military power that claims it." Rick stood up from his seat. "That's not how the expansion protocols work, General. The Eldarins have been living on Kepler Prime for over 300 years. They have legal claim to their homeworld." "Legal claims can be challenged," said Counselor Vextar, a snake-like alien who represented several smaller species. "The Corvans have filed the proper paperwork. The matter must be studied." "How long will this study take?" Rick asked. "These things require careful consideration," Vextar replied. "Perhaps 60 days, perhaps longer." 60 days? Rick's voice got louder. "General Karn just said the Eldarins have 30 days to evacuate. They'll be homeless while you're studying paperwork." General Karn's scales turned bright red with anger. "The Eldarins can wait on their ships. If they resist evacuation, we will consider them hostile." Rick felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. These aliens were talking about throwing an entire peaceful species off their homeworld, and they were treating it like a minor paperwork problem on Kepler Prime. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster was watching the situation get worse every day. She had been sent to help coordinate the evacuation of Eldarin civilians, but the Corvans were making it almost impossible. Amy was 38 years old, with short brown hair and strong shoulders from years of military training. She had joined the Human Rescue Corps because she wanted to help people, not watch them suffer. "Colonel Foster, the Corvans are bombing the capital city. reported Sergeant Mike Collins, one of her communications officers. He was young, maybe 25, with nervous energy and hands that shook when he was upset. Amy ran to the window of her temporary command post and looked toward the Eldarin capital. Black smoke was rising from several buildings, and she could see Corvan fighters flying overhead. "Are they targeting military installations?" she asked. "No, ma'am. They're hitting hospitals, schools, and residential areas. They say they're destroying potential resistance strongholds, but these are civilians. Children." Amy grabbed her radio and contacted the Corvan fleet commander. "General Fax, this is Colonel Foster of the Human Rescue Corps. You need to stop bombing civilian targets immediately." The general's ugly face appeared on her screen. He was even bigger than most Corvans, with scars across his scales and teeth that looked like broken glass. "Colonel, these are not civilian targets. Any building that could harbor resistance is a military target." "A children's hospital is not a military target," Amy said, her voice getting harder. General Fax laughed, a sound like rocks falling down a mountain. "Weak humans. You always worry about the wrong things. If the Eldarins surrender now, we will. Stop the bombing. They're not soldiers, General. They're farmers and teachers and shopkeepers. They don't even have weapons." "Then they should not have chosen to resist," Fax replied, and cut off the communication. Amy stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then she turned to Sergeant Collins. "Get me Admiral Sullivan. Now." But when Amy finally reached Admiral Kate Sullivan, the news was not good. Kate was aboard the space station Guardian, surrounded by reports and legal documents. "Amy, I understand your frustration," Kate said, her face showing the exhaustion she felt. "But the Galactic Council has denied our request to send armed escorts for the evacuation ships." "Why?" Amy asked. "We're just trying to protect refugees. They say it would escalate tensions unnecessarily. The Council wants this resolved through diplomatic channels." Amy felt her hands clenching into fists. "Admiral, they're bombing hospitals. Children are dying while the Council argues about paperwork." Kate's expression hardened. "I know, but our hands are tied. Continue the evacuation with the ships you have. Save as many as you can." Captain Danny Walsh was doing exactly that, but the Corvans were making it dangerous. Danny was a transport pilot, 32 years old, with red hair and a quick smile that made passengers feel safe. Today, his smile was gone. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Transport 7. Danny radioed his Corvan. Fighters buzzed his ship. He was carrying 300 Eldarin refugees, mostly families with young children. "I'm taking fire from Corvan fighters. My shields are failing. Transport 7, this is Colonel Foster. Can you make it to the jump point?" Danny checked his instruments. "Negative. I'm losing power fast. I'm going to have to set down on the surface. The crash was bad." Danny managed to keep the ship together, but the landing was hard and rough. When the dust settled, 50 of his passengers were dead, and another 100 were badly hurt. The survivors sat in the wreckage, holding their injured children and crying softly. Danny stood outside the broken ship and looked up at the Corvan fighters circling overhead. They could have helped. They could have let the transport leave safely. Instead, they had forced a crash that killed innocent people for no reason except cruelty. Dr. Emma Rodriguez was documenting everything. She was a human observer sent to record what happened for the Galactic Council's official records. Emma was 45 years old, with black hair and dark eyes that had seen too much suffering. She walked through the ruins of Eldarin cities, taking pictures and recording video of the destruction. Hospitals with children's toys scattered in the rubble. Schools with tiny desks crushed under fallen walls. Homes where families had lived for generations, now reduced to smoking ruins. "This is Dr. Rodriguez, Human Observer Corps, Day 15. Of the Kepler Prime crisis," she said into her recording device. The Corvan bombing campaign has intensified. Civilian casualties are approaching 50,000. The Eldarin government has repeatedly offered to negotiate, but General Thax refuses. All communication. She stopped recording and sat down on a piece of broken wall. A young Eldarin child, maybe 8 years old, was sitting nearby. His parents were dead, killed in the bombing of their apartment building. He just stared at the sky, not crying, not speaking, just staring. Emma had seen war before, but this was different. This wasn't two armies fighting over territory. This was a powerful military force destroying a peaceful civilization for profit. Back on Earth, Senator Rick Dawson was fighting his own battle in the council chambers. After 60 days of study, the council was finally ready to vote on the Kepler Prime situation. "The evidence is clear," Rick said, standing before the assembled representatives. "The Eldarins have legal claim to their homeworld dating back 12 generations. The Corvan Empire has no right to force them from their homes." General Karn stood up from his seat. "The humans are being emotional about this situation. The law is clear. Strategic resources belong to those strong enough to claim them." "What about the civilian casualties?" Rick asked. "Over 100,000 Eldarin civilians are dead." "Regrettable," General Karn said, not sounding regretful at all. "But they chose to resist legal evacuation orders." Rick felt something break inside him. Legal evacuation orders? You gave a peaceful species 30 days to abandon their homeworld, and then started bombing their cities. "The Galactic Council does not recognize emotional appeals," said Counselor Vextar. "We must follow established legal procedures." The vote was close, but not close enough. The council ruled that the Corvans had acted within their rights under the expansion protocols. The surviving Eldarins would be relocated to a barren moon called Haven Rock, which had minimal atmosphere and no natural resources. The attack on New Haven came without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning. Captain Tony Martinez was drinking his morning coffee in the command center of Orbital Defense Platform 7 when his screen suddenly lit up with red warning lights. Tony was 34 years old, a calm man with dark hair and steady hands who had never fired a weapon in anger during his entire military career. He had spent 8 years protecting New Haven, and the most exciting thing that had ever happened was helping lost cargo ships find their way home. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim, his sensor operator. She was young and usually cheerful, but now her voice was tight with fear. Tony set down his coffee cup and looked at the main display screen. 12 massive ships were dropping out of hyperspace, ships bigger than anything he had ever seen. They were dark and angular, covered with weapon ports that were already beginning to glow with deadly energy. "Are those Zentari vessels?" Tony asked, though he already knew the answer. The Zentari Collective was the other major military power in the galaxy, along with the Corvan Empire. They looked like tall, thin humans with gray skin and cold black eyes. "Yes, sir. Zentari battleships, heavy cruiser class. They're not responding to our communication attempts." Tony opened a channel to the planet below. New Haven was home to 12 million humans, mostly farmers and researchers who had come to this peaceful world to build a better life. They had children in schools, families having breakfast, people just starting their normal day. "New Haven Command, this is Platform 7. We have Zentari ships in the system. You need to raise the planetary shields immediately." The response came from General Carol Adams, the planet's defense coordinator. She was a tough woman in her 50s, who had moved to New Haven to retire from military life. "Tony, what's their business here? We're not on any trade routes." "I don't know, General. They're not talking to us. But you need to get those shields up now." Before General Adams could respond, the Zentari fleet opened fire. Beams of pure energy reached across space and struck Platform 7's shields. The Entire station shook like it was caught in an earthquake. Shields at 60%. Lieutenant Kim shouted over the noise of alarms and emergency systems. Tony grabbed his communication device and sent an emergency signal to Earth. Mayday, Mayday, this is Captain Martinez at New Haven. We are under attack by Zentari forces. Repeat, New Haven is under attack. We need immediate assistance. The only response was a cold voice speaking in the Zentari language. Lieutenant Kim. Quickly translated. This world belongs to the collective now. Resistance is futile. Tony stared at the screen showing the Zentari ships. They're not even asking us to surrender. They're just going to kill everyone. Platform 7's shields held for 6 terrible hours. Tony and his crew of 43 people fought to keep their weapons working and their defenses strong, but they were badly outnumbered. The Zentari ships took turns firing at the platform, never letting the shields recharge fully. Captain, shield generators 3 and 4 are failing, reported Chief Engineer Bob Turner. He was an older man with gray hair and oil-stained hands, who had kept the platform running for 10 years. I can give you maybe 30 more minutes. Tony looked at the planet below, where he could see explosions beginning to bloom on the surface. The Zentari were bombing cities, just like the Corvins had done to the Eldorans, but this time they were bombing humans. All hands, this is the captain, Tony announced over the station's communication system. I want you to know that it has been an honor serving with all of you. We've done our duty, and we've bought time for the people on the surface. 20 minutes later, Platform 7's shields failed completely. The Zentari concentrated their fire on the station's reactor, and Tony had just enough time to send one final message to Earth. Tell them we never stopped believing in peace. But sometimes peace has to be fought for. The explosion could be seen from the planet's surface, a bright star that burned for just a moment before going dark forever. On the surface of New Haven, Colonel Nancy Torres was trying to organize a defense with whatever she had available. Nancy was 41 years old, a small woman with black hair and fierce brown eyes who had come to New Haven to teach at the agricultural college. Most of her soldiers were farmers, teachers, and scientists who had never held a weapon before. They had hunting rifles, construction equipment turned into makeshift weapons, and desperate courage. That was all. Colonel, Zentari landing craft are coming down all over the planet, reported Dr. Steve Martinez, a botanist who had volunteered to help with communications. They're targeting the cities first. Nancy stood on the roof of the college's main building, looking through binoculars at the approaching enemy ships. She could see Zentari soldiers jumping out of the craft, tall gray figures in black armor carrying weapons that fired bolts of blue energy. All units, remember what we talked about, Nancy said into her radio. We're not trying to win a war. We're trying to buy time for our families to escape. Every minute we hold them back is another shuttle full of children that gets away. But the evacuation ships were having their own problems. The Zentari had put up an energy field around the planet that destroyed any ship trying to leave. Captain, Danny Walsh found this out the hard way when his transport full of refugees exploded against the invisible barrier. Danny had survived the crash on Kepler Prime during the Eldoran crisis, and he had promised himself he would never let innocent people down again. Now he was flying an old cargo ship packed with 300 families, trying to find a way past the Zentari blockade. This is Transport Bravo to any human vessels, Danny radioed as his ship was hit by enemy fire. The Zentari have sealed the system. No one can get out. He managed to crash land his ship in a forest outside New Haven City, but most of his passengers were hurt and they had nowhere to run. The Zentari were systematically destroying every building on the planet, making sure no humans could hide. In New Haven City, Nancy Torres made her final stand at the elementary school where her daughter Lucy had attended classes before the attack started. The building was full of families who had nowhere else to go, parents holding their children and waiting for the end. "Colonel Torres, this is Private Johnson," came a voice over her radio. Private Johnson was really Dr. Alan Johnson, a math teacher who had volunteered to help with the defense. "Zentari forces are surrounding the school. We can't hold them much longer." Nancy looked out the window at the gray-skinned soldiers advancing across the playground, where children had been playing just that morning. Their weapons were fully charged, and their black eyes showed no motion at all. "Copy that, Private. All units, fall back to the school. We make our last stand here." The battle lasted 3 days. Nancy's improvised army of teachers and farmers held off trained Centauri soldiers with nothing but courage and determination. They fought in the hallways where children had learned to read, in the cafeteria where families had shared meals, in the gymnasium where the community had gathered for celebrations. When Nancy made her final radio transmission, she was sitting in the principal's office, wounded and alone. Most of her people were dead, and the Zentari were breaking down the door. "This is Colonel Torres to anyone listening. New Haven City has fallen. The Zentari showed no mercy to civilians. They killed children. They killed the elderly. They killed anyone who couldn't fight back. Tell my parents I love them. Tell them we never stopped believing in humanity." The transmission cut off with the sound of energy weapons firing. On the other side of the galaxy, the Galactic Council was meeting in emergency session. Senator Rick Dawson sat at the human representative table, listening to the other species argue about what to do. "The situation at New Haven is regrettable," said Counselor Vextar, the snake-like alien who had helped the Corvins destroy the Eldorans. "But the Zentari Collective has filed proper territorial expansion claims." Rick stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Territorial expansion claims. They murdered 12 million humans without even asking for surrender." Admiral Kex of the Zentari Collective was present for the meeting. He was 8 feet tall with gray skin and black eyes that reflected no light. When he spoke, his voice sounded like winter wind. "The humans chose to resist. Resistance made them combatants." "They were civilians," Rick said, his voice getting louder. "Children were civilians. Children grow up to become soldiers, Admiral." Kex replied. "The Collective eliminates future threats." Rick felt something cold and final settle in his chest. "You're talking about genocide." "We are talking about efficiency," Admiral Kex said. "The Collective has allowed 100 humans to survive. They will spread word of what happens to worlds that defy us." The Council voted on whether to condemn the Zentari attack. Rick watched the vote totals appear on the display screen. 47 votes to condemn, 48 votes against condemning. The measure failed by a single vote. Counselor Vextar smiled with his forked tongue. "The Galactic Council finds that the Zentari Collective acted within established military protocols. New Haven is now a collective mining world." Rick stared at the vote totals in disbelief. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the chamber. He started laughing. The change in humanity happened overnight, and it terrified every species in the galaxy. Dr. Ben Carter was working in his medical station above the planet Altair when he received the message from Earth. He had been treating a plague that was killing thousands of Altarian children, working 18 hours a day to develop a cure. When the message came through, he stopped everything he was doing. "All human medical facilities are to cease operations immediately," the message said. "Return to Earth. Bring nothing that could help alien species. This order cannot be questioned or delayed." Ben stared at the message for a long moment. In the bed next to him, a young Altarian child named Kes was sleeping. The little green-skinned boy had been close to death when Ben started treating him, but the new medicine was working. In another week, Kes would be completely healthy. Nurse Kelly Rogers walked up behind Ben and read the message over his shoulder. "Doctor, we can't just leave. These children will die without the medicine." Ben's hands were shaking as he began packing his research equipment. Kelly, pack everything that belongs to Earth. The medicine, the equipment, all of it. But the children ... The children are not human, Ben said, his voice flat and cold in a way Kelly had never heard before. Humanity tried to save alien children. For 300 years. Now we've learned what happens to human children who trust aliens for protection. Medical Chief Glanter arrived just as Ben was loading the last of his equipment onto the transport ship. The small green alien looked confused and frightened. "Dr. Carter, where are you going?" "We still need the medicine for our people." Ben turned to look at Glanter, this alien who had once grabbed his hands and called humans blessed by the stars. Now Ben's eyes were cold as winter metal. "Your people can develop their own medicine," Ben said. "Humanity is no longer in the business of saving alien lives. But Dr. Carter, our children will die without your help." Ben walked up the ramp to his ship, then paused and looked back. "Human children died on New Haven while your government voted against helping them. Now you know how it feels." The ship's engine started up, and Ben's medical station went dark. Across the galaxy, the same scene was playing out at hundreds of human medical facilities. Aliens who had depended on human doctors for generations suddenly found themselves abandoned without warning. On the trade route between Rigel and Centauri, Captain Jake Morrison was having a similar conversation with pirates who had attacked a merchant convoy. But Jake was no longer the friendly mediator who tried to make everyone happy. The pirate leader, a scarred Drex named Thornax, was used to humans asking for negotiations. "Morrison, we can work this out like always. We'll take half the cargo and let the merchants go." Jake stood on the bridge of his ship, but it wasn't the Harmony anymore. The peaceful diplomatic vessel had been replaced by something else, something dark and angular that looked like it was built for war. "Thornax, I'm going to give you one chance to surrender," Jake said. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made the pirate's leaves rustle with fear. "Surrender? Morrison, are you feeling okay? You humans don't fight. You negotiate." Jake smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile that had made him famous across the galaxy. That was before New Haven. Now we've learned that some problems can't be solved with words. "What are you talking about? What's New Haven?" "Jake's ship fired once. There was no warning, no second chance, no attempt to disable the pirate vessel. Thornax's ship simply ceased to exist, erased so completely that there wasn't even debris left behind. The merchant captain who had been under attack sent a frantic message to Jake's ship. "Captain Morrison, what did you just do?" "You destroyed them completely. I solved the piracy problem," Jake replied. "Tell other merchant captains that this trade route is now safe. Also tell them that humans are no longer negotiating with criminals." Similar scenes were happening throughout human space. Every human diplomat, every human aid worker, every human peacekeeper received the same message: come home immediately. The galaxy that had grown comfortable with helpful, predictable humans suddenly found itself dealing with something entirely different. On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan was overseeing the most massive military buildup in human history. The orbital shipyards that had once built rescue vessels and hospital ships were now producing something else entirely. Kate stood in the main construction bay of Luna Shipyard, watching robots assemble a new class of warship. These vessels looked nothing like the peaceful ships humans had used for 3 centuries. They were dark, predatory, and covered with weapons that seemed to bend space around them. "Admiral, the Galactic Council is requesting a meeting," reported Captain Paul Brooks. He looked older than he had just a month ago, his face worn by the weight of what humanity was becoming. "Tell them we're not available," Kate said, without looking away from the new ships. "We're busy." "They're saying they want to discuss the misunderstanding about New Haven." Kate turned to face Paul, and he took a step back when he saw her expression. "Paul, 12 million humans are dead. Children are dead. There's no misunderstanding to discuss. What do I tell them? Tell them that humanity is no longer interested in their opinions about anything. Tell them we'll speak to them when we're ready, not when they want to talk. The new ships coming out of the human shipyards defied everything the galaxy thought they knew about physics. They moved through space without engines, arrived at destinations before they finished leaving their starting points, and carried weapons that erased targets from reality itself. Dr. Emma Rodriguez had returned from documenting alien atrocities to lead something called the Department of Human Intelligence. Her office was buried deep underground on Earth, filled with information that made her old reports about war crimes look like children's stories. Director Rodriguez, we have complete intelligence on every major alien military installation, reported. Agent Chris Walker, a young man who had once been a peace studies student. The networks you built during your humanitarian work have given us access to everything. Emma looked at the data flowing across her screens. Corvan military bases, Centauri. Fleet positions, the personal schedules of alien leaders who had voted against helping human children. She knew where they lived, where they worked, where they felt safe. Chris, for 30 years I documented alien cruelties and begged the galaxy to care about innocent lives, Emma said. I have recordings of children being murdered, cities being destroyed, entire species being wiped out for profit. Yes, ma'am, your work helped save millions of lives. No, Emma said quietly. My work helped aliens feel better about the terrible things they did. They could point to my reports and say they were following proper procedures while they committed genocide. She turned to look at Chris, and he saw something in her eyes that made him understand why aliens across the galaxy were starting to have nightmares about humans. Now I'm going to use everything I learned to make sure they never hurt human children. Again, the first alien government to truly understand what was happening was the Altarian Republic. Medical Chief Glanter sent desperate messages to Earth, begging for Dr. Carter to return. The plague that Ben had been treating was spreading, and Altarian children were dying in massive numbers. Please, Dr. Carter, Glanter said in his recorded message. We are sorry about what happened to your people at New Haven. Our government voted to condemn the Centauri action, but we were outnumbered. Please don't punish our children for what other species did. The response from Earth came from someone Glanter had never heard of before, Director Rodriguez of Human Intelligence. Medical Chief Glanter, your government voted against sending aid to human refugees from Kepler Prime. You voted against condemning the Corvan genocide of the Eldorans. You voted against providing military escort for human evacuation ships at New Haven. Emma's voice was calm and professional, like she was reading a weather report. Humanity remembers every vote, every decision, every time alien governments chose politics over protecting innocent lives. Your children are dying because you taught us that children are acceptable casualties in political games. But they're innocent, Glanter pleaded. So were the human children on New Haven, Emma replied. Your government can develop its own medicine. We're sure you'll find the motivation. The message ended, and Glanter realized that the gentle, helpful humans the galaxy had known were gone forever. News of humanity's transformation spread throughout the galaxy like a plague. Species that had grown comfortable with human aid workers and peacekeepers suddenly found themselves cut off from help they had taken for granted. The Corvan Empire tried to test human resolve by attacking a neutral space station near the border of human space. General Karn, who had overseen the destruction of the Eldorans, thought humans were still the same weak species they had always been. His fleet of 12 battleships approached the space station, expecting to find human diplomats ready to negotiate. Instead, they found Captain Jake Morrison waiting for them in his new ship. General Karn, you have 10 seconds to turn around and leave this sector, Jake said. Karn laughed his grinding rock laugh. Morrison, you cannot threaten the Corvan Empire. We have seen what humans do when they are angry. You file complaints and hold meetings. Day 31 arrived with the kind of silence that comes before earthquakes. Admiral Kex of the Zentari Collective stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the empty space around the Zentari homeworld. His fleet of 200 warships was the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. Each ship could destroy a planet by itself. "Admiral, long-range sensors detect no human ships approaching," reported his tactical officer. "The humans appear to have been bluffing after all." Kex nodded, though something cold was moving in his stomach. "Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that the Zentari Collective does not bow to human threats. Our expansion will continue as planned." But as he spoke, something impossible happened. The stars around the Zentari homeworld began to flicker and change. Space itself seemed to fold and twist, and suddenly the human fleet was there, surrounding the planet as if they had always been there. The human ships looked nothing like the peaceful vessels the galaxy remembered. They were black as empty space, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved through space in ways that hurt to watch, arriving at their destinations before they had finished leaving there. Starting points. "Admiral, the human fleet just appeared without any detectable approach," his tactical officer said, his voice shaking. "Our sensors show they materialized from nothing." Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared on Kex's main screen. She looked older than when he had last seen her, with silver hair and eyes like winter storms. But there was something else in her expression, something that made Kex's cold blood run even colder. "Admiral Kex," Kate said, her voice calm and professional. "You had 30 days to withdraw from conquered territories. Those 30 days are over." "Human, you are surrounded by the greatest fleet in galactic history," Kex replied, trying to sound confident. "Your small force cannot threaten the Zentari Collective." Kate smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "Admiral, we gave you a chance to do the right thing. You chose to murder children instead. Now you get to learn what happens when humanity stops being patient." Kex opened his mouth to respond, but Kate's image disappeared from the screen. A moment later, alarms began screaming throughout his ship. "Admiral, the humans are firing." His weapons officer shouted "Dot," but when Kex looked at his tactical display, he couldn't understand what he was seeing. The human weapons weren't energy beams or missiles. They were something else entirely, beams of pure nothing that erased whatever they touched from existence. The first Zentari ship to be hit didn't explode or break apart. It simply stopped being there, as if reality had decided it had never existed in the first place. Then another ship disappeared, and another, and another. "Return fire," Kex ordered. "All ships, concentrate firepower on the human flagship." 200 Zentari warships fired their most powerful weapons at Kate's ship. The energy blasts that could have destroyed planets struck the human vessel and simply disappeared, absorbed by shields that seemed to be made of folded space itself. Kate's voice came over the communication channel, speaking to the entire Zentari fleet. "You wanted to see what humans do when they stop being gentle. You murdered 12 million of our people and laughed about it. Now you'll learn why we chose peace for 3 centuries. Her voice paused, and when she continued, every alien in the fleet could hear the weight of 300 years of restrained anger. It wasn't because we were weak. It was because we knew what we were capable of when we stopped choosing mercy. The human response was swift and absolute. Ships that had taken decades to build and centuries to perfect vanished in seconds. Zentari crews who had thought themselves the masters of space found themselves facing weapons that operated outside the laws of physics they understood. Within 6 hours, the Zentari Collective's entire military force was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply erased from existence as if they had never been built. The only ships Kate allowed to survive were those carrying families and civilians. On the planet below, the Zentari government waited in their underground bunkers, expecting the humans to begin orbital bombardment like the Centauri themselves had done to New Haven. Instead, they received a communication from Colonel Nancy Torres. Nancy Torres, who had been reported dead at New Haven, walked into the Centauri government building alive and unharmed. She was accompanied by a squad of human soldiers wearing armor that seemed to bend light around it. "How are you alive?" asked Prime Minister Kethver of the Centauri government. "Our reports confirmed your death at New Haven." Nancy smiled grimly. "Your reports were wrong. Humanity has had defensive technology for centuries that we never bothered to mention. We didn't think we'd need it as long as we could solve problems with words." She walked to the center of the government chamber, where the Centauri leadership was gathering in confusion and fear. "But you taught us that some species only understand force. So now we're speaking a language you can understand. What do you want?" Prime Minister Kethver asked. "The Centauri Collective is disbanded as of now," Nancy said. "Your military is gone. Your territories will be returned to their original inhabitants. Every officer involved in the New Haven massacre will stand trial on Earth. And if we refuse?" Nancy gestured toward the window, where the Centauri could see human ships hanging in their sky like dark angels. "Then we'll find someone else to govern this world. Your choice." The Centauri surrender took less than an hour. On the other side of the galaxy, the Corvan Empire was having an even worse day. Their primary military base at Arcturus 7 housed 3 million soldiers and the Empire's most advanced fleet. It had never been successfully attacked in 800 years of constant warfare. At exactly 0800 Standard Galactic Time, it simply ceased to exist. General Thax, who had overseen the destruction of the Eldarin homeworld, was commanding the base. When it happened, one moment he was reviewing plans for new conquests, and the next moment he was standing in empty space, kept alive only by a human energy field. Captain Jake Morrison's ship materialized next to the floating Corvan general. Jake's face appeared on Thax's emergency communicator, and his expression was colder than the space around them. "General Thax, you killed 100,000 innocent Eldarins and bragged about it to the Galactic Council," Jake said. "You said that weaklings who couldn't defend their world didn't deserve to keep it." Thax's scales were shifting through colors of fear and rage. "Morrison, you cannot threaten the Corvan Empire. We are the strongest military force in the galaxy." "Were," Jake corrected, past tense. "Your base is gone, your fleet is gone, and your empire is about to learn what humans do to bullies who hurt children." Jake's ship disappeared, leaving Thax floating alone in space with just enough air to think about what was happening to his empire. Across Corvan space, every military installation was simply vanishing, erased from existence by weapons that operated beyond anything the Corvans understood. Corvan Emperor himself surrendered when human ships appeared around the Corvan homeworld. Emperor Drax, who had ruled through fear and violence for 200 years, found himself facing creatures who made his worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams. "We surrender," Emperor Drax announced over every communication channel in his empire. "The Corvan Empire submits to human authority. Please don't destroy our worlds." The response came from Dr. Emma Rodriguez, who was no longer just documenting atrocities, but preventing them with methods that terrified everyone who heard about them. "Emperor Drax, your empire will return all conquered territories immediately. Your military will be disbanded. Your government will be replaced by a council that includes representatives from every species you've oppressed." "And if we refuse?" Drax asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then you'll join General Thax floating in space while we find aliens who are interested in treating their neighbors with respect." The Corvan capitulation was complete and immediate. Back on Earth, Senator Rick Dawson was receiving surrender messages from dozens of alien governments. Species that had laughed at human diplomatic protests were now begging for mercy from the same humans they had considered weak. "Senator Dawson, "The Rigel Confederation wants to negotiate," reported his aide. "They're offering to return all territories they've taken in the last 50 years. Rick looked at the messages flooding in from across the galaxy. Fear had accomplished in days what 3 centuries of patient diplomacy had failed to achieve. "Tell them that humanity is no longer in the negotiation business," Rick said. "They'll return the territories because it's the right thing to do, not because they want to make a deal." Dr. Ben Carter's medical stations came back online, but with new rules that shocked the galaxy. His first message to alien governments was simple and clear. Human medical aid will be provided only to species that sign the Human Protection Accords. These accords mandate the protection of civilian populations, outlaw conquest for resources, and establish Earth as the final authority on interspecies disputes. The accords were signed by every major government within a week. Species that had spent centuries fighting each other suddenly found themselves living in peace, not because they wanted to, but because humanity no longer gave them any other choice. Galaxy that emerged from humanity's 30-day war was fundamentally different.